Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, May 13th, 2026, and this is the 354th episode of the Midweek Roundup. And today, like every week, we're going to be taking our questions that we answer here on the Roundup from our newsletter content that comes out on Monday mornings, either in email format via an email subscription service that you can subscribe to free of charge at smieconsulting.org/subscribe, or via LinkedIn. The link on that same page I just gave you is available to subscribe to the LinkedIn version, where you'll get a notification every Monday morning when it first pops in your notifications. So thank you for joining us. As the newsletter that we put out on Mondays is where we get our fodder for the questions that we answer here on Wednesdays. There are 4 general sections to that newsletter. Social media section, that is basically anything online, digital, AI, webinars, anything like that impacts international education. Then a U.S. Central section that talks about some of the news stories and legislation, executive orders, and other releases of our first question today. Any new survey releases, we'll cover those in the U.S. Central. And then Solutions Central, which covers more of the positive thoughts on what can be done to improve our condition in international education circles. So all of that's available through the newsletter. And then a Global Roundup section, which covers what's happening in the rest of the world related to international education. And certainly the theme as of late in the big 4 countries, US, UK, Canada, and Australia, is that we're all enduring self-inflicted wounds to our international education efforts, and we talk about that certainly in the Global Roundup section. So, thank you again for coming to be a part of this conversation here on Wednesdays. The newsletters, between the 2 versions, we now have well over 3,000 subscribers. So excited that so many of you are making that content a regular part of your international edification each week. So let's get right into it with our first question of the day. A very timely one on what does the latest Global Enrollment Benchmark Survey tell us? Now, for those not familiar, the Global Enrollment Benchmark Survey is a joint effort between NAFSA study portals and the Oxford Test of English, and that comes out a couple times a year. And they timed this one to come out just before NAFSA. Obviously, it's happening in a couple of weeks in Orlando. I know many of you will be attending or anxiously looking forward to that for commiseration, if nothing else. Certainly the camaraderie and the collaboration we have with our colleagues from around the U.S. and the globe, frankly, that will be at the conference are certainly much needed at this time of year, particularly when we're really facing some existential threats to who we are and the way we've been doing things in international education in the United States and around the world has changed. A lot of these wounds that we've been suffering are self-inflicted by our governments, but it's up to us to really take a step back and look at what we can really be doing to make a difference in our communities, and to not just say woe is me, and to be proactive as much as possible and look at other avenues to truly make our profession survive and thrive in the longer term, become more diverse, more diffused in terms of the kinds of ways we are doing our international education work, and the kinds of locations, the kinds of methodologies and the formats that we're using. All of that matters in this very changeable feast we have in front of us. And a Global Enrollment Benchmark Survey does give some really useful data. It's a survey that goes out to not just U.S. institutions, it's a global thing. I think there were over 250 institutions globally that participated in this survey. No weight was given to big institutions versus small, and it's really a sampling of what's happening in different countries. And the clear indication was, and there's some very interesting charts you can get a hold of from this report that really lay clear how, which misery does love company amongst the big 4, that we have all suffered significant losses in the past year in terms of our international student populations. for a number of different reasons, most of those having to do with the greater degree of scrutiny international education regulations, immigration regulations are getting in the big four countries. We've seen very extreme cases of caps put in place in Canada in 24 and 25 that really laid out a very significant losses for the Canadian international higher ed organizations and institutions, where up to 60% of Canada's incoming students dropped off the face of the earth in fall of 25, by the end of 25, I should say. We see in the U.S. we lost 17% last fall. Numbers are probably overall larger than that. We'll see what it turns out to be in the coming crucial summer term. Certainly the early returns on visas for us from overseas, particularly in the key markets like India and Nepal, have not been positive. There's been a relatively low trickle of students getting visas from those key markets. We're seeing a greater uptick in some other regions, in Latin America, in Central Asia, in Southeast Asia. We're seeing more interest popping, and China as well. In fact, now that President Trump is firmly in China for the next 36 hours or so, he'll be having some first of what could be 4 meetings this year with President Xi of China, and hope is that will free up some concerns with regard to students, though it's not obviously a primary issue on the agenda. There's certainly going to be some discussions and probably loosening of grip on visas in China for U.S. embassies and consulates there. That's what the hope will be, or potentially China's role in helping to drive Iran to the bargaining table and to end the war there. And certainly there's a lot on the table, and certainly the people that Trump brought with him to China. He always likes to lead with the commercial and economic carrots, so to speak, with regard to, or stick, as it was with the Europeans and other nations, the tariff debates that gripped us all in the last year and a half. But you're certainly seeing with folks like Elon Musk, like Tim Cook from Apple, and also Jensen from, my goodness, I'm blanking on the name right now, but Jensen Huang from one of the biggest NVIDIA, biggest tech companies around. All of them came with Trump on the way to China. So they came off the plane with him, followed him down the steps, and got the greeting from that audience of 300 Chinese students waving flags for China and the U.S., saying welcome. So interesting to see what happens there. But certainly we are all facing some real challenges with regard to our enrollments. The last 2 intakes, certainly the January and the last fall intake, and the early day doors are not promising for the fall yet, predicting another 20% decline of new students from some of the recent reports we've seen. So the Global Enrollment Benchmark Survey again does give you a really sobering look at where the drops have been most significant. Certainly, you see the master's degree for the U.S. and for and undergraduate for Canada are the 2 worst affected of the big 4 countries, down 24% each. U.S. undergraduates down 20%. Then we would have Canadian grads down 19%, UK undergrads down 11%, postgrads down 15%, Australian postgrads down 16%, and undergrads only down 1%. So, but you see significant increases in APAC countries, up 14% for undergraduates, up 5% for postgrads. European countries up 5% undergrad and 1% for grads. So the 2 areas that are now becoming the big 14 in Europe and in Asia Pacific, outside of Australia, are certainly getting a lot of play. In terms of what we're looking at, some of the key findings from the report, about half the universities surveyed reported lower enrollments compared to the same time last year. The 73% of universities surveyed reported that restrictive government policies and visa issues are a significant issue, with 67% mentioning these issues as having the biggest negative influence on enrollments. So the issues that for those that were coming or deciding to go elsewhere were affordability and cost of living as significant concerns. So in Canada and European countries, the English proficiency requirements were significant issues that a lot of the external factors that are out of the control of individual institutions are what ends up driving what we are able to do and what we're not able to do in terms of, and predicting has taken on a whole new art form, become a whole new art form in our daily jobs, and predicting with any degree of certainty what we're going to look like for fall based on previous years' visa success rates is certainly not a very promising state of affairs at this point. So what we're seeing is the universities are looking at different intakes, that they're doing a number of deferrals, that they're offering January starts for second year students, so beginning their degrees in their home countries and then transferring for their second year. Other ways to at least keep the student engaged and maybe giving them an opportunity if there's a TNE location. Obviously that's not possible for Australian students or international students looking at Australia, since the government has said if there's a TNE option in your country to do the same degree that you wanted to come to our shores for, we won't give you a visa. So Australia's kind of put themselves in a hole there in terms of not only doubling their visa fees, doubling the cost of their visa applications, and costs for what they need to show, and increasing English language requirements. You see Australia also becoming more restrictive. They're putting soft caps on what percentage of institutions' populations can be international. So we do certainly have a lot going on in terms of the impact. So definitely worth your while to download the report just to get a sense of where we are with the data there. Just to give you some of the details again, it were 254 universities, 36 countries, 149 in the US, 39 in Europe, 24 from the UK, 13 from Canada, 9 from Australia, 9 from APAC. So fairly good sampling from around the world. So definitely worth getting the information from that report and sharing that with leadership. And certainly shouldn't be a surprise to leadership if you've been keeping them informed and sharing obviously content from our newsletters, and if you've been getting your updates from NAFSA and other sources. You know how significant an impact the last year and a half has been in the United States. You certainly know globally, if you've been getting the newsletter, that we're not the only ones suffering these kinds of losses right now. We have probably a situation that really is quite surprising to most. When for those who haven't been getting the newsletter, when they start having the opportunity to look at what's happening in the rest of the world, they're starting to see, hey, we're not alone here. We're suffering quite a bit. We're not the only ones. There are many others that might even have it worse. So certainly we'll touch again on the subject a little bit in our second question of the week, and that question is related to: has international ed permanently changed? And that's the question, but it's more of a rhetorical question, because of course it's always changing. And what does that mean? Has it permanently changed? Have we crossed the Rubicon? Is there a tipping point that we've just gone through that we can't get back from? There's no road back for us. And I don't think that's the case. International education has always been a cyclical process and a market for students, and there's ups and downs and swings and roundabouts, and certainly internal push factors away and pull factors to different countries over the years. Those always can and do change with the time. But a very interesting piece this past week from the gentleman who I think is part of Hubble, not Hubble telescope, but it's not even Hub. And I want to make sure I get that right. The gentleman's name who wrote this Interesting article about can we outgallop the four horsemen of higher education? George Chilton, founder and creative director of Hubbub, not Hubble, Hubbub Labs, considers how international education can escape a pending sense of doom. And certainly he's not the only one that's felt this. I think we've all had our moments where we felt, oh my gosh, is this it? Can it get any worse? And we all know what's coming with the end of DS in the next few weeks. But the article here that he writes talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and he morphs what those four horsemen are into our international ed language. Horseman number one, he calls the integrity gap. So the idea of the AI's impact on our ability to understand who's actually learned the material, perhaps, where it is potentially possible to have two students, one who mastered the subject on his own through the research that he did, and another who used ChatGPT to complete everything. That might be a little bit extreme, but certainly if they leave for the same qualification, how will the employer know either one knows their stuff, really, other when they don't have ChatGPT to solve it for them? So that's the integrity gap. We see it also on the university side. We just have seen Princeton, just as I was preparing for this morning, has put out a statement that they're basically, with regard to AI, that they're basically abandoning their 133 or however old their honor code is, to now require proctors in exams at the university. So they're no longer trusting students to do the right thing. So the integrity gap is real, and we hope that there will be ways to graduate students who truly have mastered the knowledge and not dishonestly, if we're going to call it that, cheating through use of AI to do all their work. Whether that's possible or not for all their work, we'll certainly see. Horseman number two, he calls politics and migration. And again, he takes a broader look as to what's going on in the Big Four, talks about the T&E opportunities as a way to change student flows. And where one student goes, others will follow. That's the typical process, on both positively and negatively. So when you have one or two students from a particular market that you've been working on for a while, they enroll and have positive experiences, and then they tell two friends, and so on and so on. But it also works in reverse. If you have students come from a market you've been investing quite heavily in, and they have a bad experience or feel like they've been ignored or their needs are not being met, then you will have that blow back on you quite quickly, and could ruin quite a good thing if you have students that are not able to succeed at your institutions. So the third horseman, the outdated degree. And that's one we're all fearing, not only the degrees that we have, perhaps, if we had a tech degree that's more outdated than others, but also are the skills that we are graduating students with appropriate for the jobs that they're going into? That's long been the concern of do students have the soft skills to succeed? They might know how to be a mechanical engineer, but can they do a presentation? Can they argue effectively for X, Y, and Z to be added into their portfolio, or to advocate for budget increases? So all of these things are the lifelong learning piece is changing the way we do things. Many of us who grew up in liberal arts or Catholic education systems that focus on lifelong learning certainly can relate to this. We've been bred in it through the liberal arts that to have developed soft skills and to have a set of skills that will help us transition from not only one job to the next, but one career to the next. And that's a big piece of what we have to make sure we're preparing our students for. And then the final horseman, purpose over prestige. He makes the claim here that Gen Z and Gen Alpha that they want careers that are adaptive, mission-driven, industry agnostic, and not tied to a single employer or skill set. Students aren't selecting schools to power their careers anymore. Only 6% say their main goal is to reach a leadership position. What's more, 89% of Gen Z considered a sense of purpose to be important to their job satisfaction and well-being. So what is motivating students? We need to certainly take that into consideration. Excuse me, my goodness. But in terms of the permanent changes that are being wrought on international education, there are a couple of posts, LinkedIn posts that gave me some good food for thought this week. Wanted to share those with you too. One of those was from my friends at ECE. As many of you know, I've served on the board of directors of ECE for 6 years. They have put out demand and migration patterns in education credential evaluation, kind of a not necessarily a canary in the coal mine, but certainly a report that emphasizes something that I think is important for us to keep in mind. Not just all of government changes and what countries are up, what countries are down, but they make clear in this report, it's a 9-page report that they did in conjunction with the JDAP, and they say that demand isn't disappearing, it's shifting. And institutions that pay attention to these early signals are better positioned to respond. And so that the point is credential evaluation being an early indicator of student intent, often well before their applications are submitted if they're doing it right. So this is something I think is well worth looking at. It's often an afterthought for most of the international admissions offices, but those who keep their ears to the rails, so to speak, ears to the ground on what some of the upcoming trends might be, or this year's trends might be, in early indicators of how we should approach this coming fall's intake. It's a little bit late for new applications for the fall, given the visa situations that we're already experiencing for students. But well worth a read from this Insights paper, Demand and Migration Patterns in Educational Credential Evaluations, a data-driven analysis of international student mobility, and that's put out by ECE and the JDAP. So definitely worth having a look at that. Final piece on the second question here about the changes that we're experiencing. Recent newsletter I've been paying a bit of attention to. They do some very, very good food for thought articles every week. This week they had one on how new geography is shifting traditional strongholds, and the big four that we all know have seen the decreases we've talked about. And he makes the point that these aren't isolated fluctuations. They signal broader rebalancing, as he puts it. That you see new markets have been emerging and consolidating. You see international student mobility is not concentrated anymore in just a handful of Western destinations. And part of our challenge moving forward is to adapt as Western institutions to these new realities and look at where what these other destination markets are offering that we don't. And there are certain things that we offer that they can never offer in terms of the quality and the value, perhaps value for money, career opportunities down the road. But in terms of the preparation, the ease of getting a visa, the safety and stability, until the Gulf War, or until the Iran War, you certainly had the Gulf becoming increasingly strategically important, particularly in the UAE, where they had there were strategies to increase international students to 50% of total higher ed enrollment by 2033 in Dubai. So that's not incremental, that's significant, it's transformational. There is a significant investment going in there, and institutions in the West that want to maybe provide a pathway to US or Canadian or UK or Australian degrees might intentionally look at the Gulf as a midway point for those where in the Middle East, in the Gulf countries especially, there are strong diasporas from South Asia that are already living and working there, parents and who are sending their kids to local schools, or not local, but international schools or Indian specific schools to get them ready for higher education. They're already living and working in that environment, so this could be an easy stopover for them before they come to the US. You also see part of this diversification of top markets is reflective of a larger trend from globalization to regionalization. And that's not that globalization is disappearing, it's just becoming more regionally configured, in his words. So the fact that economic contributions are becoming central to all decision making in some of these countries. It's no longer just international cultural exchange or institutional diversification. It's increasingly positioned as economic infrastructure. Certainly in a lot of East Asian countries, we've seen the very direct ties between workforce development, labor skills shortages, to international education to bring in the talent in particular fields that come and study and then have pathways to work and residency afterwards to fill economic needs in the country. So very insightful piece, I think, and there's a lot of competition that's happening here that is a lot of times out of our control as individual educators on our campuses, but it's all about educating and managing expectations up the chain in terms of what we can be doing to really help prepare our institutions for the change that's going to be coming our way, and it will be coming for years to come. Now, the final question of the day is, how is T&E being implemented differently in China and India? Not Iran. Not a lot of T&E opportunities in Iran right now that are certainly functioning. But let's talk about that. India and China, obviously the two largest population countries in the world. I've been following Charles Sun, who's founder and managing director of Consortium of Chinese Universities for International Partnerships, CCUIP, since 1999. And he really has his finger on the pulse of helping Chinese universities connected with overseas partners from the UK, from Canada, US, Australia. But he has regular weekly columns on what's happening with T&E in China. And this week's column was on the untold T&E opportunity in China's undergraduate expansion. And why? China, very much an authoritarian country in terms of very much on the 5-year plan model that they've just released their 15th 5-year plan that takes effect 2026 to 2030. And he makes mention this includes a strategic directive that has received remarkably little attention in international higher ed circles, where the quote is, to promote quality improvement and capacity expansion in higher education and expand enrollment in high quality undergraduate programs. Why is that a focus? High quality undergraduate programs being delivered in China. We do know China is trying to get back to where it was pre-pandemic in terms of reestablishing itself not just as a source market for students going abroad, but also as a destination for international students. As of the last count, they just put out their first data since the pandemic, since 99, I think, or not 99, 2019. That I think they were upwards of 500,000 international students back then. They are about 380,000 now, so they're on their way back up. They dropped off to probably 100K or less during the heights of the pandemic, and they've taken a while to rebound. But they're purposefully building programs, expanding the international student capacity at their institutions, but also expanding the number of English taught degrees at Chinese universities to give students the opportunity to receive a Western degree in English while they stay in China, in what has become known as an undergraduate model, as the 4+0 model. That I know a number of colleagues in other states have been able to implement fairly successfully. I had been, when I was at Ball State in Indiana in the noughties, we had a 1+2+1 program with about a dozen Chinese universities that we worked through ASCU to get set up with their corresponding organization in China, CCIEE, CEAIE, that helped us get those partnerships set up and doing the work that was necessary to do the articulations and figure out which the mapping of all the courses for a bachelor's degree, dual degrees. So that is what many Chinese institutions are looking for, not necessarily the 1+2+1, but these 4+0 models. And they do these as cohort models where they recruit students as they're taking their Gaokao. They're given options to sign up for X program in this field at this university that has a pathway for a US, UK, Canadian, Australian degree. So they're doing that because China, approaching demographic peak in university age students, is looking to a peak at between 75 million, go from 75 million high school graduates a year now to roughly 91 million in the next 6 years. And at the same time, public demand for elite university places outstrips supply, and that's no surprise, it's long been the case. There are in China 147 double first class universities, kind of the equivalent of kind of the most selective institutions in the U.S. That they admit less than 6% of all Gaokao candidates admitted annually. So what a lot of the idea of getting into a good university that might previously have those admission rates might have forced many Chinese families to look abroad. They are looking abroad still, but in much smaller numbers, but they're looking in more diverse ranges of places. A number of undergraduates coming to the U.S. and to other major destinations is dropping off. They're been looking at Hong Kong since the pandemic and other locations in Southeast Asia. So they are looking to keep more of their best in country now and give them these 4+0 proper opportunities with U.S. degrees delivered and UK and Canadian and Australian degrees delivered, very much all in country. So that is very much the China model, where it's very organized, very structured, and very planned out. And then you have the Indian model, which is, even though it is not as strictly regulated and restrictive as maybe China is, they have the Indian government back in 2020 released the new NEP, National Education Policy, where they laid out some requirements for what TNE could be, and they limited it to top 300 universities in the world that could actually physically set up their own campuses in India. And they have districts in Mumbai, in Gujarat, outside of Delhi, that are designated spots for these institutions to set up their own campuses. They've had about 13 approved and another 15, 20 that are in the pipeline now for approval, but mostly from the UK, Canada, Australia. UK and Australia more than anything else, but only one US school is physically opening, and that's Illinois Tech, which will be opening up in August, their first incoming class. So the questions have been popping through, is a TNE degree in India worth it? Is a TNE experience worth it? You certainly have seen the UK took a huge delegation of universities there in the fall and late fall, early winter, and had some very good success there because obviously they're the largest group of institutions that are being set up out next to Australia. So the government is trying to provide more high quality opportunities for students, much like in China, that there's a national entrance exam for universities and very small percentages, probably much lower than the Chinese even, maybe less than 2% or 1% for a number of and much harder to gauge quality there, I think, in India, outside of the IITs and the IIMs. But you see that a lot of U.S. schools aren't really jumping in yet. Purdue and one other school are considering it, opening campuses. Obviously, they're top 300 schools, so they can do that. Other institutions like ourselves at University of Akron, while we do have a #1 in the world program in our polymer science program, a very niche program that not a lot of folks know about unless they studied chemistry very well, we aren't on any of those top 300 lists overall for QS and those kind of rankings. So we can't open our own campus, and frankly, we don't have the budget to ever consider doing that because it's financially it's significant investment to do that unless you have local backers. We are looking at what we call a campus-in-campus model, and we're not the only ones doing it. Many institutions are considering it now, where you find a partner in India that you have an established relationship with, that you have perhaps complementary programs to what they're already offering that you can deliver wholly on their campus in India, and doing that through a number of different ways. We're looking at doing something like this in about 3 or 4 other countries over the next 2 to 3 years. It's a longer term play because it's not something that next summer you're going to be able to get your first class in, and frankly, the revenue is not going to be what you're charging back at your home campus. It's going to be a fraction of that because costs are lower for expectations of what the market will pay. Certainly going to be a lot lower when you're delivering a program in another country like that. So certainly that's been the experience. UK, Australian institutions that have done TNE locations in other places, in China for years, in other major markets, they see that there's no way that they could charge anything close to what they pay at the home for students coming to their home campus. So it requires a greater flexibility of delivery to look at hiring local faculty at the institutional partner to deliver your courses, and that's largely what the China 4+0 model is based on, frankly. So what we're looking to do potentially in China, if we can get approvals on some certain things, what we're looking to do on India will be finding a local partner to deliver our program where our overhead will be lower, that we'll be using existing facilities, that we can deliver some of our courses that the home university doesn't have on their books already. We can have those delivered online for some of our gen ed requirements for undergraduate degrees, and have our faculty from the department cycle through there to teach 2 or 3 classes on a fairly regular basis for those upper division courses for undergraduate degrees. So that's what we're looking at the University of Akron, but certainly in terms in India, there are 2 very different models that in terms of what the lion's share are moving towards. But the reality is we don't have, frankly, the budget to go building campuses everywhere. Most of my colleagues do not in the U.S., and that the only cost-effective models are completely online or delivering the program on the campus of a partner institution that you already have a good relationship with. So that's the other piece. You got to have good relationships out there to even consider that, and that those aren't things that are going to happen overnight. Those need to be developed over time. So it's a long-term play, and if senior leadership at your campus is wise to this as an option, if you're going to be talking TNE, you tell them it's at least a 3 to 5 year planning process before you're going to see significant or see any returns on the time that's going to be required to put the pieces in place to make those things happen. So certainly a lot we can learn from what's happening in India and China with their development of TNE. So that's all we have for you this week on the Roundup. Next week, we'll be having our last pre-NAFSA Midweek Roundup and getting ready for some of the hot issues. We're going to be crossing our conversations with colleagues in Orlando at the end of the month. So until then, we wish you the very best and look forward to chatting with you next time. Cheers.